Welcome to the Unscripted podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Nicastro. Today, we're going to be talking about how, as technology democratizes knowledge, the duty of leadership is expanding. I'm excited to welcome back to the podcast Venkata Reddy Mukku, who is the Vice President for Worldwide Service and Support at Bruker Nano Surfaces and Metrology. Venkata, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you, Sarah.
It's great to have you here again. You've been very busy since you were on the podcast last with your role at Bruker. You were named one of our Future of Field Service Standout Leaders of 2024 last year. And in addition to that, you have completed certification as a professional coactive coach from the Coactive Training Institute. So if anyone isn't familiar, that is the world's largest in-person and online coach training and leadership development organization that has trained over 145,000 global leaders. When I was looking into them, I loved their tagline, which is changing the way the world relates. So to start, can you just talk a little bit about, why you decided to take on the coaching role and complete that certification in addition to your full-time day-to-day work?
So I was very fortunate. I had a lot of good mentors and coaches throughout my career. And I kept mentoring my team. And then I realized that we have great technology, but if I give people what they need to do, I give them the solution, they come back to me all the time. But coaching techniques really helped me empower them by asking questions. So, when I saw my coach, helping me, empowering me, I thought I should actually get certified myself so that I can provide value and then really make everyone, because everyone has solutions in their head. You just need to help them get them out. And that actually gives them a lot of confidence to go and get things done. So that kind of encouraged me to go do that certification.
Yeah, very good. Now, I like how you mentioned in the wording you use on your LinkedIn profile that in the mission of what you're doing, that there's a ripple effect when you are supporting leaders. So how that helps them, but also trickles down to their teams. How have you noticed this show up? How have you seen this play out in your experiences?
So I was coaching a female leader, a year or so ago. She was struggling to deal with the big change management project. She was not trusting herself, which was reflecting in the results and in the collaboration she had with her team. Through the conversation, I asked some questions and used my coaching techniques, and she actually looked at it from a different perspective since then. And the way she started seeing herself, trusting herself, and collaborating with people made a big difference. After a few sessions, she came and told me one of the engineers that she never thought would step up actually stepped up, took a leadership role, helped with the change management process on the project itself. So shows that if you help someone, they help someone else, and then that actually, supports many more people. And that's the ripple effect that I was talking about.
Yeah. I know this isn't the case for you, Venkata, but I think it's just an important reminder. Sometimes I talk to people who are in organizations that, the culture maybe isn't what they wish it would be, and I think sometimes that can feel frustrating or suffocating and can even, wear down over time their desire to make an impact because they feel, like they're fighting against this big wave, right? And so it is really important to remember that there is a huge ripple effect in whatever we're doing day to day, and so if you're in an organization that has a long way to go to really focus on empowering employees and having a positive culture. Don't underestimate the effect that you can have by just starting to do these things with your team, and how that will, permeate through different folks in the organization. So we talked about how, in the AI era, the technology part is becoming easier. So in the sense of, with everything we have at our fingertips, technology is democratizing knowledge, and making that very rapidly accessible to anyone, which puts more emphasis and demands on the people part. So can you talk a little bit about what you see happening and the importance that it puts back onto people and therefore leaders?
I mean, AI is making things easier, helping us become more effective and productive, helps us get things done fast, but it cannot understand customers' frustration. It cannot, come up with solution when things don't go to the plan. As AI is, helping us get better, the human part is more important now. I read an article yesterday, actually, so where a company that used various AI agents to really streamline their process lost a very important key customer, because it's now putting everyone into these buckets, and you are not getting that human support anymore. We got it. That's the feeling that our customers need. That can only be given by a human. So we need to use AI to get better at repetitive things, but the human part is very crucial to keep the business going and help customers get to their goals.
So from a leadership perspective, what does that mean in terms of the skills that leaders need to be focusing more on or improving upon, to kind of shift from, in some ways more of a operational or execution type mentality of, how do we get this information where it needs to be? How do we execute this thing? So AI can support a lot of that process, but then there's this people part and the, emotional intelligence and all of these things. What would you suggest people be focusing more on so that they are ready as this shift takes place?
I mean, this is the change is coming to us very quickly, right? I always ask people to just step back and see and make sure what you do makes sense. And it helps you, and then put yourself in customers' shoes as well. I always try to create this, fail safe, and an environment where people are okay to make some some mistakes and learn from their failures. So while I encourage them to be pragmatic, I also encourage them to take some bold steps to go and try it. And then if something goes wrong, just make sure you learn from it so that you don't, do it again. So it's all about asking them questions, to challenge the status quo, and then try new things and create that culture of, learning and growing. That's something that really helps. Sometimes, it's okay to say that you don't know, right? That's what I've been telling, I don't know this, and kind of give that feeling like, okay, I don't need to know everything. I don't need to make everything right. But if what I have makes me do this, and most of the time it works because we're very good people, but sometimes if it doesn't work, that's not the end of the world. We learn from it, we share, and we take it to the next step. So that's kind of a mantra that helps me gain that trust, and then make people take, steps that they are not afraid, they would be afraid of if not creating this environment.
Yeah. What you're saying, Venkata, makes me think of the importance of psychological safety, and, the idea of leading by example, right? To your point, leaders can say, well, I want people to, I want to normalize making mistakes and learning from missteps, or, it's okay if you don't have the answer. But if your teams don't see you, making your own mistakes, or, being open when you're in situations where you don't have the answer, then in a lot of instances, it's more empty words than it is a real belief in what you're saying. Seeing you or whomever the leader is, admit mistakes, or be vulnerable, or say, I don't know, that's what really normalizes that among teams. And makes me think of a theme that I've been talking to quite a few people about, particularly when we talk about AI, which is the importance of trust and transparency. And right now I'm thinking this is true for customers as well, but right now I'm thinking specifically about our employees and our teams. We need to be very conscious of the fact that there's a lot of fear around, what AI will do to people's jobs and livelihoods. And, I think sometimes what happens is when we don't know exactly what the trajectory is going to be, because things are changing so fast, we either don't say anything, or we give platitudes and false hope. And either of those things is going to exacerbate that fear or that anxiety about what's coming, right? And there's this importance of just being transparent and truthful to build that trust. And that doesn't mean that you have to know everything, right? Like you can just be honest in saying, right now we have so much work to do in adopting AI that no one's jobs are at risk in the near future.
Yeah.
Beyond that, I don't know what will come, but I do know X, Y, or Z. We're committed to upskilling and reskilling. We need people in this, and this. This will never go away. Whatever those truths are, right? It's okay to, not know. I had a conversation with another one of the standout leaders in Sweden when I was there in May. And, she said, I don't know what's going to happen with some of our roles, as AI evolves. And I'm just being very truthful with people about that, because not being truthful with them, is causing way more damage, right? Absolutely. And so I think it's just an important point to kind of drive home of, being aware of this kind of cloud of anxiety that exists, and, thinking about how do you create that openness, right? And that dialogue and that trust, so that, you can keep people feeling as secure as possible and engaged, and, able to come to you and say, I'm worried about this, or I have a question, or I have a concern. That's the environment you want to create, so.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So, when you were on the podcast the first time, we talked about, your perspective on how you create competitive advantage in service is through your people, your teams. Yeah. So you shared that as a leader, your focus is primarily on your teams, and your belief is that this will pay off in the ways that it needs to with your customers and ultimately with financials. So it's a podcast I still reference very often, because I think it's a mentality that is growing, but one that is in some ways at odds with, more of an old school type of leadership style. And so, as you've gone through your coaching certification, and you've, begun working with people in that way, how has your belief in that focus, and even the way you interact with your teams at Bruker, how has that evolved?
Again, I always believe, in people first mentality. Richard Branson, I think once said, you take care of your teams, they'll take care of their customers, not the other way around. I really believe in that. I mean, that actually shows in the engagement of the team members. A
Mm-hmm.
fully engaged team member is 2 to 3x more productive than someone else, right? So, and you can see great teams' productivity versus an average or mediocre team. So we try and make sure that we create this. It's not easy. It takes time. It takes a lot
Mm-hmm.
of trust and effort to create that. But wherever we spend that time, we see results. It's just,
Mm-hmm.
and we even see people when they find another opportunity elsewhere and they have to go, the way they feel, leaving this team tells a lot.
Mm-hmm.
We are happy for someone getting, a promotion or an opportunity they can't deny, but then they always will, cherish. Matter of fact, yesterday someone came to me and said, someone moved on to a different role, said, "Hey, I heard that, this key person quit. Do you need me to come and help after my work?" I mean, this is just unbelievable, right? Someone who
Mm-hmm.
left the organization months ago reaching out to you on LinkedIn, asking if they could come and help.
Mm-hmm.
That says a lot about that team, and the leadership in general. So it makes a difference. The
Yeah.
people engagement makes a difference. And it's difficult, especially with such a VUCA, volatile world we are in. It really, it encourages people to come to work because they are, oh, my colleague depends on me. So they work with each other, they help with each other. And it's difficult, especially you are working global customers, demanding customers. And if you don't have that, teams fall apart real quick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So my belief is that you were already a great leader before you underwent your coaching certification. But can you share one or two things you learned in that training that I don't want to say made you realize like, oh, I should be doing this, or like, what is a new skill or way you engage with your teams at Bruker? Like, what has shifted in your approach as you took on that education?
Listening, because I never knew that there are multiple, types of listening. I generally listen to answer. I'm actually working halfway through the other person's statement as to what my answer
Mm-hmm.
is going to look like and how I'm going to fix this. But then there are three, levels of listening, and now I try to be in at least level 2, level 3 most of the time, which means I'm not thinking of the solution anymore. I'm really giving full focus to the other person, listening, and then understanding, and then taking a pause that will really make the other person complete what they're trying to say, and then also assessing their facial and the situation around them. So very powerful indeed. Makes me be much more calmer in
Mm-hmm.
conversations. Allows me to ask questions instead of just giving answers or solutions, which actually most of the time doesn't help because you're
Mm-hmm.
making them depend on you. So yeah, that's the listening part is something that really changed. Um, I constantly need to remind myself that be a coach like
Mm-hmm.
leader. don't
Yeah.
don't go and be the solver. So yeah,
Yeah.
but it really helped me change the way I deal with things.
Yeah. If you just think about as a human being, how often we don't say what we mean the first time we speak, right? So if we think about, people always talk about struggles with change management, and there can be resistance or an objection or a frustration, right? And, you know, often the objection as it's stated the first time is not really what is underneath,
Mhm.
And so if we're only listening to that first statement and then replying with a solution or do it anyway,
Yeah.
whatever it is,
Yeah.
right? You're not actually getting to what the person needs to say, right?
Yeah.
And I just wrote about this last week, actually, because we had a really interesting conversation in Nashville at our Future Field Service gathering about, you know, companies, leaders talking about how as we increase the use of AI and automation, employees are becoming frustrated because it's taking away their autonomy. And we were talking about the example that was brought up initially was on, a planning and scheduling optimization tool. So employees used to be able to structure their own days, and now there's a tool in place that makes that far more efficient, right?
Mhm.
And so what I was saying in this article is, if we look at automation versus autonomy, we can't not automate, right? I mean, you can't make a conscious choice not to improve efficiency of the process by 30% just because you don't want to frustrate employees.
Yeah.
We also can't afford to have employees that aren't engaged and satisfied, right? So how do we kind of sort this out? And one of the things that I said is, understand the root cause of the resistance to giving up what the process was before, and I mean, really understand it, because only then can you decide what you are or aren't willing to accommodate, right? Maybe someone really likes to stop at their favorite coffee shop every morning. That could be fine. They could go against the route and just do that. You probably, most leaders shouldn't care if it's a 5-minute thing, right? Or maybe they, whatever it is, like, what is making them feel that introduction of this tool is giving up autonomy? Like, what actually are they worried about losing, and so it is, I like this point about, it's so important to really, like, not just listen to the first statement or the first presentation of the issue, but to really dig into it a bit to understand what is lying underneath, because that most of the time is what really needs to be addressed, so that's a powerful learning.
Absolutely. I mean,
sure.
Again, listening is what that is. The one thing, if I have to say, the one thing from coaching is all about listening.
So okay, so I've been following your journey on LinkedIn, and you've shared some really great stories and learnings, and I've enjoyed them. So I picked out a few that I wanted to talk through. So the first is around overwhelm and over-involvement or reactivity. So your advice is that you don't just continue sort of clearing the surface level clutter, but you address the root cause. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Again, most of the time we want to do everything. That's the normal, way of working. So we have a list of things we want to complete everything. That overwhelms a lot of people. People just think, oh, I just need to spend more time to get to the bottom of the list. But really, the one thing that I, request or recommend my team is prioritize, try things differently. Delegation is something a lot of people, don't do well because they don't trust their team, or they think they can do it perfectly. Perfectionism kills productivity, right? So, and then when they aim for perfectionism, when they are not open for delegation or collaboration, that's when you overwhelm yourself. So these things are something that, a lot of managers struggle, and I try to ask them questions through my coaching techniques. I generally ask them, what would happen if you just let it go? I mean, people always they don't even think if they give it away, they don't even think. They think I have to do it. So those questions really make them think differently. And then I encourage them to change one step at a time through questioning. Makes a big difference. People overwhelm themselves by not giving up the task, or by not, by focusing too much on being perfect.
Yeah, I'm guilty of that. So the next one is, we touched on this, the power of listening. So what I want to talk about here, you already talked about, this being a big learning for you and something that you've put more focus into. Can you explain the levels 1, 2, and 3, just so people understand what that is and what the differences are?
Level 1 is like, I talk and I'm also, talking inside and outside. Level 2 is just I'm focusing on you. I'm just observing. I'm taking all the information. Level 3, I'm also noticing what's happening around you. So if someone rings your bell, I say, "Oh, looks like someone is," So you are actually focusing fully on the person and also what's happening around them. So it's important, level 2 and level 3, because if I'm thinking of what I should say next, I'm not actually grasping everything from the person on the other side of the table.
Yeah. And I like the point you made too about the power of pause, and giving people space to say something else or complete their thought. It's definitely an underutilized superpower, for sure. Okay, so the next one is stability to balance all of the change. So you shared, in our pursuit of bold goals and big adventures, it's easy to undervalue the power of stability, predictability, and a well-grounded routine. As leaders, we often talk about embracing discomfort and chasing uncertainty, which is vital, but equally important is creating spaces of comfort and predictability for ourselves and our teams. It's in those moments of normalcy where resilience is rebuilt, clarity returns, and energy is restored for the next big push. So, can you share any examples of how you've done this for yourself or for your team?
So again, we all need something that we can count on, that basic routine, life. And I actually embrace it. I enjoy it every day. One thing that with my team, I have my one-to-ones with my direct reports every week. And unless I'm on a plane, I generally don't cancel them. Because there is this routine of making sure that I talk about their team, and then it can be major escalations and the commercial situation. Everyone, it's like a routine that once they give it to me and they know what they can get from me in those sessions. Of course, we talk multiple times through the week, but that is like the full updating myself, updating them as to what's happening about them, and then they updating me about what is happening with the team, customers, and commercial. So that's one thing. That routine updates actually gives them peace of mind, gives me peace of mind that I'm able to help them. The same thing goes my manager and above, so they can expect the same thing. So that routine actually tells me that I have a time that I can vent or get support required, anything I want, right? Because we are, if something is changing, our system or anything, if we are changing a CRM, but the way you communicate with the customer, that stays. So you can actually, one thing is common. The other thing, if you have one change, because you have the routine, you can manage this change and you can get through it. But if everything is moving, you don't know where to start and where to end. Yeah. So I the same thing. I start my day every day, with the gym, and then end of the day I have my own routine. So those things makes me feel comfortable starting and ending my day, and I like to encourage the teams to have the similar thing in place.
What you just said made me think of maybe an opportunity in how we communicate around change, right? So we talk a lot about, when we talk about change management, we talk a lot about communicating the why, right? What you just said made me think there is likely an opportunity in a lot of instances to also consider the framing of what's not changing, right? So, we focus so much on talking about what is changing because that's the project we're working on, the process, the tool, whatever it is. But perhaps we calm people a bit if we talk first about, what is staying consistent, what is not changing. So it's just something to think about. And I think, talking about this point also reminded me of another point that's come up a number of times, which is, we often are looking for the opportunities to improve, to evolve, to innovate. We don't always put equal effort into looking at opportunities to streamline, so a lot of times we're adding things, we don't always take enough time to reflect on what could we be taking out, right? Yeah. Of processes, of routines, et cetera. And that can be, a practice that can be very helpful too, to just like we talked about how quickly things are changing. We build these routines and then we don't always go back to think, okay, is this still working? Is this still necessary? Do we still need to do this way? Do we need this specific report? Do we, whatever those things are. And so I think as leaders, it's really important to think about how we, not only create this consistency that you're talking about, but we also kind of minimize complexity as much as we can.
Very important, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. The next one is perspective is everything. So I love what you said is we can get very overwhelmed when we look at the future through today's lens. So what does this mean and how do we shift our perspective in a way that can be helpful?
I mean, I get overwhelmed at times, but then I just think, will it matter next week, next month, in a year from now? Majority of the times, no. So we kind of overwhelm ourselves and lose energy and be tired, by looking at it from, current lens. So I always I try to visualize. I also encourage my team to, when they feel buried, I ask them, hey, what's making you feel that way? What skills do you think we can learn by dealing with it? Right. So let's just in 2 years from now, when we are done with it, what do you think we would have learned, from this experience? And then what got easier? So what happens is when they realize that, yeah, we are past this, we tackled this 2 years down the line, it is easier. And now they actually come back and say, oh yeah, this is a growth opportunity instead of feeling like I'm buried and it is very difficult to navigate through. So it's really taking them through, making them visualize that they're, done with it, and then they also learn from it, and then they come back and say, okay, let's do this and this. So making them see it from different perspective. The other thing is a lot of times we don't value what we have. We always think, don't have this, so then you are only saying, I don't have that. But if you just step out and then see it from a different angle, like you have many more things to actually tackle this. So visualizing is one thing, and then looking at it from different side. You see a problem as a problem, or you see a problem as an opportunity. It's how you perceive it matters. So I try to ask different questions so that people can actually think from different angles and different perspectives. Most of the time it helps.
Yeah.
You don't realize if you say it in the same way, you are feeling overwhelmed all the time.
Right. When I read that line, looking at the future through today's lens, I also thought there's no way for you to look at that future point and think about how much more capable you'll be, or how much more capable the business will be, or how much the tools and support you have may have evolved. Do you know what I mean? So it's it's a really interesting idea to just think about reframing that a bit. Really good. Okay, so communication. So you shared a quote from George Bernard Shaw that says, "The greatest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place." And I just think it makes me laugh only because I think about how many times I've witnessed that, and thought, oh, I mean, that's a huge leadership misstep, for sure. Do you have any examples of how you've, refined your own communication, or, how you see this trap kind of happen?
I mean, even now, it's very easy for me to assume that, oh, I told them, they must have understood it. But big mistake, it's not always, if I say got it and then move on, and assuming that people got the message is not always true. So now I am trying to ask, do you have any questions, or what questions do you have around this topic? Are we on the same page? Instead of got it and move to the next thing. If I, I always say that.
Can I just say one thing on that? And I know we're talking through this in real time, but even I just want to make a point on communication here. A distinction, if you will, is, do you have any questions versus what questions do you have? Even that, it's a closed-ended yes or no question versus an open-ended question that demands a response, even if the response is, I don't have any, right?
Yeah.
And I know we're just talking through it, but I'm just saying, like, again, when you talk about listening and communicating, these are things that very little difference of 1 or 2 words makes a huge difference in the outcome, not only in what you get in response, but whether the person you're speaking to believes that you really care if they have questions. If you just think about yourself in an interaction, if someone just explains something and they say, got it, boom, blah, 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 versus what questions do you have? Like, your perception of whether they care about how you digested that or what you think, you know what I mean? Yeah, so I just wanted to say that. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but it was just, I think, an interesting moment to point out, because this is just another example of these little things that have a very big impact.
I totally agree, because again, in coaching, we are taught to use what, when, how questions, no close-end questions. So I'm trying to be conscious of asking open-end questions, because that actually makes people think and answer, and then involve themselves much more. And the other thing I also noticed is, you say something, you ask what questions do you have, and then you go, and that's not the end of the story. These important things needs to be reminded. You need to say them not once but multiple times until people take them and take ownership. So that's another thing. You say, oh, we had a good discussion, I asked for what else they need and what question they have, and boom, it's done. No, you have to constantly go back and then make sure that the message is digested and received well and acted upon. Otherwise, people are busy.
Yeah.
They're busy, and they tend to miss. Not willfully, but there are chances that they miss. So again, communication, follow up, and closing the gap is pretty important.
Yeah. And that works both ways. I think there are leaders who really, aren't great at their jobs, if we're being honest. There are leaders who just have never had the opportunity to build certain skills. There's leaders that come from a different, era or culture of mentality and thinking that makes them maybe not best adept for today's landscape. And there's, people, a very small percentage of people that I think are actually like malicious, right? But the vast majority are doing their best and are also busy, which is why we default to got it, great, and then we're on to the next thing, and we don't think to come back to it. It isn't in most cases that we don't care, or we don't want to support whatever questions or feedback the team has. It's just that we're all, and that's why it's important to understand these things in this type of granular detail so that you can set the right intentions and build the right practices and reminders and, all of that into what you're doing. Yeah. Okay. So the last one I want to talk about is kindness. And I think this is so important to think about. You, not too long ago, shared a wonderful story of your manager urging you on a trip to Barcelona to go and see a site that you wanted to see. So rather than me tell that story, can you share that story and then talk about the impact that had on you?
So we were in a sales kickoff meeting, and so there is. I had a personal commitment that I needed to leave early instead of leaving the following day, and then the meetings were 3 days, and I'm leaving on the second day itself, or second day afternoon. The second day evening, the team event was to go to this cathedral that's been under construction for over 100 years or so. Beautiful landmark, and then. The first evening, my manager heard that I'm leaving early and not going to see this, and he said, he asked me when is your presentation, and then I told my scheduler and said, why don't you actually leave after your presentation, see that because it's beautiful and you don't come often here, and we'll take care, and if we have anything, we'll come back to you with questions. I mean, he didn't need to say that. He didn't need to. Give me the option of leaving and then spending time and then taking advantage of my travel to Barcelona. Again, it's just hit me, that actually made me feel, I always respect him as a great leader, but those simple, kind gestures make you feel so connected to the organization, to the leader. That makes me go above and beyond. When my manager asks me to do something, I do not only because it's my job, but because I respect and I care because he cares for me. So that goes a long way. And I felt very good with his gesture. Kind man, but he doesn't necessarily need to tell me to, after lunch, off you go, and then, we can talk later. So that was a very nice gesture by him. And I really, and then when I went there, more than that church beautiness, and I thought, I have a very good manager and a good team. So that made me feel good. Again, I'm with the company for over 20 years, so it says a lot about the company. But all these good managers makes it even better. Yeah,
I remember on our first podcast, you talked about, in one of your answers, you said, I try and treat people like human beings. And I said, but what does that look like? Right. And we talked about the fact that that is such a hard thing to give concrete examples around, because I think you even said it just depends on the person and the situation, and you did give me some examples, but this is another example of, thinking about your employee as a person, not an asset, not, just a machine that only exists to produce. And I feel like this is a really good reflection of, how you as a leader kind of take a step back and really think about people as people, and show these opportunities of kindness that are going to leave that lasting impact. I think you're right. He didn't have to do that. I think you certainly didn't expect it, and most people wouldn't. And I think, in all fairness, a lot of leaders wouldn't have thought about what you were going to miss.
Yeah.
Period. And then also offered you the opportunity to not miss it. Right. Yeah. So that is, it reflects very highly of him. It also shows how this type of thinking trickles down through an organization, going back to the ripple effect, right?
Yeah.
you then feel empowered to think about and treat your employees the same way, and then
Absolutely.
they do, right? And
Yeah.
this is where these type of it's not about a culture on paper, the mission statement or the values. It's about how it's lived out in moments like this that create that loyalty and that engagement. Yeah, so it's a really powerful example.
Yes. Yeah.
What's your advice for how leaders can look for the opportunities to create more moments like that with their team?
So, very good question. I tend to see what would make my leaders, the leaders that work with me, feel empowered after my one-to-one or anything. So we always try to look for opportunities. I always ask people if someone goes above and beyond, we actually do give them spot awards. So I encourage, probably my team uses most of the spot awards in the organization, because when someone goes and travels overnight and come and do something and again travels overnight because we have another customer commitment, we don't just take it for granted. We really want to make sure that it is recognized and appreciated, even though sometimes it's part of the job. That extra commitment should not be overlooked. So that's something that we try and remind ourselves and do all the time. That I do. If my leaders don't see it and I say, hey, that engineer did an amazing job. Can you recommend him for it? What I'll approve. That's one thing. Rewarding is one thing, and recognizing and celebrating is another thing, right? So we generally, when I go to any country, if I know, if my through my one-to-one, if I hear that engineer did an amazing job, I take time to actually go thank them personally. Just a shake hand, but that just goes a long way. Things like this, non-tangible stuff, we try to, we have our own team coaching sessions. We really understand the value of, that human relationship, how our emotions and moods define our productivity and capability. So it's all about these regular charts that we have. How do we, engagement is a big topic, and then all these kind gestures and recognizing and rewarding is a topic that we discuss on a very regular basis.
Yeah. And, just to bring it back to a point that has been a big through line of this conversation, the better you get at listening, the more opportunity you have to see where you could apply kindness and have that impact, because you'll understand better what's important to people, what's going on in their lives, what are they maybe, dealing with, struggling with, like whatever those opportunities might be for you to see them as a human and say, hey, what if you did this, or what if I could, whatever the thing is, right? The better you get at listening to people and really hearing, them, and like you said, scanning the environment, understanding what's going on, the more aware of those opportunities you can become. So really good stuff. One last question is, when we spoke, you said you're currently taking a course called The Scientist of Yourself. So I'm really curious, what is that about, and how do you feel like that will add to your skill set?
So it's a course developed by a professor from Oxford and a professor from Kent University. I think they've come up with this course with because of data and experience. What it does is it measures the mood. They have developed a tool to measure the mood, and the mood will have an impact on our emotions, and emotions will have an impact on our productivity. So how our mood is impacting everything else, and then how to actually make it better through coaching. Measure it, coach, help, empower, so that they're emotionally more balanced, and then productivity goes up. So that's the kind of very high level concept. It was very intriguing. I've heard actually one of the directors at that institute is used to be my son's school head teacher, a
Okay.
seasoned business leader, came to school to give back to this community, and then went back into education in a different format, executive education. I've listened how passionate he is about this. I've seen, how it works in real world, and I thought I should, get this skill set because our moods have the biggest impact, and we don't understand that as much. So I thought it's very interesting. I talk about a lot of productivity, efficiency, and all that stuff, but here it goes bottom up. It's mood, emotions, and then productivity. It's not productivity and the other things below.
Yeah.
So it's biology. It's how our biology works, how mammals think and react, and what affects our moods. And so it's pretty interesting concept. I thought, let me learn and then see how I can help my team, because most of the time customer service is all about emotions management. And what customers' mood is, our engineers' mood, and how the emotions come out of that interaction. So it's very interesting concept. So I'm just getting that certification done. Till in 2 weeks, I'll be done with that.
Awesome. Well, Venkata, listen, I appreciate you coming back and spending some more time with us and sharing, what you've been working on and how it's, affecting your leadership and what you see happening with, the growing use of AI and everything. But beyond that, I mean, I admire your perspective on leadership. I think it's really a great example of for people of how having the right focus can pay off. And I also admire your commitment to continuous education and continually improving yourself and learning new things. So I really, I'm a big fan of your journey, and I'm sure you'll be back again, but thank you so much. I mentioned earlier, I have really enjoyed a lot of the stories that you're sharing on LinkedIn, and I would encourage any of the listeners to give Venkata a follow because he's taking his experiences in leadership at Bruker and coaching and really distilling them into some really inspiring stories and food for thought in your posts. So really good stuff. I hope you keep it coming, and I hope you come back again soon.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I enjoyed our chat, and appreciate it.
Yes, absolutely. You can find more by visiting the home of the Unscripted podcast at futureoffieldservice.com. The podcast is published in partnership with IFS. You can learn more at ifs.com. As always, thank you for listening.